Today, the cryptocurrency Litecoin experienced an attack that resulted in a block reorg. I wanted to dive into what this means a little bit and try to answer some of the questions that this raises about proof of work blockchains and if we can live in a multi-proof of work blockchain world. Let's dive right into it. So this first tweet came from Alex, who is a developer on Litecoin, I believe. And he said, Litecoin experienced a coordinated attack on the chain that resulted in 13 block reorg that took more than 3 hours to generate. During this time, attackers were performing double spend attacks on multiple cross-chain swapping protocols. We are investigating the situation. So I really like Jesse's overview here, Jesse Myers. Check out some of his work, by the way. He wrote the Once in a Species publication, which was really good. It combines some concepts in anthropology to explain why humans crave scarcity and kind of ties that into Bitcoin. It's super interesting. He also created the Bitcoin and global assets chart, which I use all the time in my videos. So he said this is why there will only be one proof of work cryptocurrency trusted to store value. All others are vulnerable to 51% attacks. And since POS, proof of stake, is inherently controllable and mutable, they also remove themselves from contention. Bitcoin has already won, clear every day. And I generally agree with this take, but let's dive into it a little bit more. So first, I have a little bit more of an overview on the attack and what actually happened. So malicious miners gained enough hash power or computing strength to create their own version of the Litecoin blockchain. The attackers broadcasted their secret chain, which was longer than the public one. Because blockchain rules follow the longest chain, the network automatically deleted the last 13 blocks of honest transactions and replaced them with the attackers' blocks. The 3-hour freeze, it took only over 3 hours for the network to stabilize. During this time, anyone who thought they had received Litecoin found those transactions undone. Attackers used this window to perform double spends on cross-chain swapping protocols. They sent LTC or Litecoin to a bridge to get another coin like ETH, then erased the LTC sent using the reorg, keeping both the original LTC and the new coins. They eventually were able to fix this issue. So I wanted to dive into what actually is Litecoin. So Litecoin is a fork of Bitcoin, and basically what that means is Litecoin explicitly changes the rules of Bitcoin. So instead of staying in the Bitcoin network and convincing everyone else in Bitcoin, all the Bitcoin or people running Bitcoin software to change their rules and run this new version of Bitcoin that has all these changed rules, they basically said, we're going to go off and we're going to do our own thing. And when that happens, when you start a new chain with new consensus rules, the chains basically split into two. And because you are starting to mine blocks that are not compatible with the Bitcoin software, right? They're Litecoin blocks, so essentially it becomes a completely separate blockchain. So Litecoin has faster blocks roughly every 2.5 minutes. As we know, faster blocks, means more blocks, and it means more data you have to store if you want to run a node, and it has a higher supply of 84 million coins. I'm not sure the exact reasoning for that, but a lot of people, or I guess some of the marketing efforts behind Litecoin, is that people said it was silver to Bitcoin's gold, right? They said it was, another type of metal that does some different things similar to silver, but I think we'll see that this narrative isn't very kind in history. So I got a little overview here that I'm going to read from my friendly neighborhood AI on some of the history of gold and silver and how they interacted with each other with different countries on different monetary standards. So he says here why digital silver can be a risky comparison. Historically, silver was money of the people. That's what people called it. They used it for daily trade, while gold was for central banks and international settlements. However, this didn't end well for silver. the crime of 1874, major powers led by Britain and then the US moved to a strict gold standard, effectively demonetizing silver. People holding their wealth in silver saw its value plummet because it was no longer money, it was just a commodity. And I do believe the same thing will happen to gold over time, right? Because we've perfected digital scarcity. I don't believe personally that gold will continue to be money. I think gold will continue to be a type of metal that has some kind of use, in different things, right? It's a commodity that people use to manufacture certain things, make jewelry. But I don't believe gold will be money because we have a better form of money. And just like with gold and silver, people converged on the best form of money, which was gold. And with gold and Bitcoin, I think people will converge on the best form of money, which is Bitcoin. So the exploitation of silver nations, countries like China and India remained on silver standards longer than the West. As Western nations dumped silver to buy gold, the value of silver crashed, wiping out the purchasing power of the silver standard nations and making their resources cheap for gold standard nations to buy up. And I think it'll be the same thing with Bitcoin and crypto, as well as Bitcoin and gold. Then next we have the supply inelasticity. Unlike gold, silver was often too abundant. New mines like the Comstock lode flooded the market, causing inflation for those using it as money. In the crypto world, critics argue that if Bitcoin is truly digital gold, a digital silver isn't necessary because Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. You don't need a lighter coin for small payments. And I agree with this, right? Bitcoin, 1, is infinitely divisible, and 2, there are many layer 2 protocols building on top of Bitcoin which allow for this kind of silver liquidity that people are looking for with Bitcoin. And kind of the last aspect of this, I don't really look at price too much, but it is interesting to view Litecoin when you price it in Bitcoin. It's just lost a ton of its value over time when you price it in Bitcoin. When you price it in dollars, it probably doesn't look as bad because dollars lose value forever. But when you compare it to Bitcoin, Litecoin has not performed well, and that's because it doesn't have the same network effect as Bitcoin. It doesn't have the same robustness of the protocol like we saw with this attack on the Litecoin network. Bitcoin being so ahead in terms of hash power gives it that security and makes an attack like this virtually impossible. What do you think about this attempted hack? Let me know if I missed any details or could expand on anything. If you want to buy some Bitcoin on an exchange, my personal recommendation is River or Strike. I have referral links down for those below in the description. That's about it for this video. As always, together, let's work, save, and build a better future with Bitcoin. See you in the next video.